Many women have to take medicines during pregnancy, but could they be risking the health of their unborn child?
She could be mentally, physically disabled and she could have no quality of life.
Even doctors don't know if most prescription drugs will be safe during pregnancy.
If David's condition was preventable and it wasn't prevented, that's really, really awful.
The thalidomide scandal was meant to have improved safety monitoring, but could another drug have damaged far more children?
So you really do think it's much bigger than thalidomide?
A lot bigger. And that's why there needs to be a public inquiry, because we don't know the facts.
With evidence that other common drugs are linked to heart defects in babies.
How does no one know that this is going on?
How much do we really know about the safety of pills in pregnancy? It's exciting times for Jo Burrows. She and her partner are moving to a bigger flat in Croydon before the arrival of their first baby. They're having a girl and plan to call her Emily. But Jo, a nursery teacher, is facing a stark reality. She has epilepsy, so to control her seizures, she needs to take powerful medicine.
If I wasn't controlled, I wouldn't be able to do the job that I do. If my tablets didn't work, it could ruin my life.
But the pills that protect her health could have harmed the baby she's carrying. Jo's pregnancy wasn't planned. She was 4 weeks pregnant and still taking the drug before she realised.
Was there a discussion at that stage that you should maybe try a different one?
No, because after the first 4 to 8 weeks, the tablets would have had the effect on the fetus anyway.
That's quite a difficult thought to deal with.
Yeah, especially not knowing that, you're already pregnant.
So far, all Jo's scans and tests have come back clear. But not all the disabilities linked to the drug she's taking can be detected in advance.
We just have to wait and see and get her checked out once she's born and then keep getting regular checks.
It's not just women with epilepsy who find themselves in this situation. Most women take medicine in pregnancy, often before they realise they're expecting. And that's the key time when the baby's heart, brain and other organs are forming.
You might expect that all medicines have been thoroughly tested to show that they're safe during pregnancy, but it's not considered ethical to test drugs on pregnant women. So doctors simply don't know for sure whether most of the drugs they prescribe to pregnant women could harm their baby.
And for families, the problems that can lead to can be life-changing.
Wow, good girl.
Phoebe Vaggers has a lot to deal with for a 4-year-old. She has poor eyesight, struggles with speech and learning. Her mobility is poor, and so is her hearing.
You do it. I thought you might. Good girl. Very beautiful. It's nothing, and she's trying to fly.
Her mum, Gemma, has epilepsy and, like Jo Burrows, took a drug called Epilim throughout her pregnancy.
If I don't take that drug, I can say to you now 100% I will have a seizure. I could be walking across the road, have a seizure and be knocked over. Because I don't get any warning, I don't know when it's going to happen, so it's very dangerous.
The benefits to Gemma of taking her medicine are clear. But before getting pregnant, she and her husband wanted to know whether it could pose a risk to the baby.
We thought we'd do it the proper way, get proper medical advice, because obviously you knew you were on medication.
Yeah.
So went to see a neurologist.
They say the epilepsy specialist told them there was a small chance the baby could have a cleft palate, spina bifida or Down syndrome. Risks that have been well documented. And on balance, risks they felt prepared to take.
We came away from that appointment feeling really happy, being confident.
Last thing he said was, you know, young, healthy, see no reason why you shouldn't go on to have, you know, a healthy, happy, you know, baby. We left there feeling great.
Yeah.
When Phoebe was born, she didn't have any of the problems they'd been warned about. It was months before they realised something was wrong.
She wouldn't sit up and then not crawling. It was these major milestones that she just wasn't hitting.
No one made the link with Epilim, so Gemma was still taking the drug when they tried for another baby. It was only when Gemma was 5 months pregnant with her second child, Charlie, that she discovered her daughter's problems had been caused by the pills she was taking. Today, they're going to see the specialist who broke that bad news to them 3 years ago.
All right, so I'm going to hold your hands, OK? Looking at her hands again, her finger's a little bit tapering, which is the sort of thing we might sometimes see. Well, I don't know if that's true on the other side. Not quite so much, which is good.
Dr. Peter Turnpenny suspected straight away that Phoebe's problems had been caused by Epilim.
It was one of those situations where they bring the child into the room and, you know, before they're sat in the chair, you've recognised the problems or the features that are evident in the child's facial appearance.
He diagnosed Phoebe with Fetal Valproate syndrome, a range of physical and developmental problems caused by exposure to Epilim. Gemma and James had never heard of the syndrome. And there was more bad news. There was a high chance the baby she was carrying could have the condition too.
It was quite difficult. And obviously I was pregnant with Charlie, so it was really hard.
Charlie was later diagnosed with the same syndrome. Like Phoebe, it's had a major impact on his life.
He's developmentally delayed by about 18 months. He's not talking, he's not putting sentences together. I think his understanding is there, but there's no sort of clear sentences yet.
How about Phoebe?
Come on,
Their parents tried to give Phoebe and Charlie as normal a life as possible. But they don't yet know what the future holds for them.
It's very difficult to know. I have certainly seen some young adults who have been exposed to this drug who struggle with independent living.
So this is a lifelong condition for some people?
I think for some, at the more severe end of the spectrum, that is undoubtedly the case. Do you want to just stand down next to Mum and we'll try and measure your head? Excellent. Good fella.
Dr. Turnpenny says up to 20,000 children could have been damaged by Epilim.
47. Good.
The Vaggers can't turn the clock back, but they are sure they would have done things differently if they'd been able to make an informed choice.
I can't be on no drug, which is obviously the ideal scenario, but we tried everything else we could have before having a child on Epilim.
New evidence about Epilim's impact on the mental development of children is still emerging, even though the drug's been prescribed for 40 years in the UK.
The initial studies that we've done seem to show that more children have neurodevelopmental delay and even autism or be on the autistic spectrum. And figures of up to 30% of children being affected are now being quoted.
That's a pretty substantial risk.
It's a huge risk.
Are you surprised it's taken so long for this risk to become apparent?
I am very surprised. 40 years this drug has been prescribed to thousands, if not tens or hundreds of thousands of women worldwide.
How can it have taken so long to discover that a widely used drug has harmed up to 1 in 3 babies exposed to it during pregnancy? Janet Williams says 25 years ago, mothers like her didn't know of any risks. She lives near Blackpool with her 2 grown-up sons, both of whom have fetal valproate syndrome. 22-year-old Philip is more seriously affected.
And with Philip in particular, it's constant reminders of things. I mean, like in the bathroom here, we have little notices about not forgetting to wash and brush his teeth, and because if that's not there, then when he comes in the morning, he just totally forgets.
What sort of challenges do you face?
Memory, for one. I haven't got a good one. You have to tell me three things 3 times before it actually sinks in. And even then I try not to forget what you just said.
From her bedroom, Janet now runs a campaign group with Emma, another mum whose children have been damaged by the drug. They think Epilim's manufacturer should take some responsibility because they say the company only began to give women adequate warnings in the mid-1990s.
To put the onus on the prescriber, I think, is all wrong. Really, it's the drug company that should be bearing the brunt of this, especially for the older kids, definitely.
And it gives a scenario.
I like this one. Yeah.
Some families tried to sue the drug company Sanofi Aventis, but the case collapsed 3 years ago. The company says it warned doctors from the beginning. Now, Janet and Emma want a full public inquiry.
This drug's been out on the market for 40 years this year. It's come to a point now where the public inquiry is a necessity to find out what's happened, why the system's failed.
Sanofi Aventis told Panorama,
"The information made available to doctors by Sanofi has, since the product was first marketed, contained warnings of possible effects in children. Sanofi has regularly reviewed and made changes to its safety information with developing scientific knowledge."
Whether blame lies with the drug company, prescribers or the medicines regulator, a medical tragedy on this scale was never supposed to happen again. In the 1960s, thousands of babies were born with serious deformities because of a drug called thalidomide their mothers took during pregnancy. Nick Dobrik is one of the few hundred remaining adult survivors in the UK. He and the Thalidomide Trust are shocked by the largely hidden damage caused by Epilim. Now they too are campaigning for a public inquiry.
It was thought at the time a tragedy like thalidomide would never happen again, and how so wrong we were. I think the Epilim story is a much greater disaster than even the thalidomide story. To think that this tragedy on a scale maybe as much as 20 times larger than thalidomide has happened and gone unnoticed is incredible.
So you really do think it's much bigger than thalidomide?
A lot bigger. And that's why there needs to be a public inquiry, because we don't know the facts.
Around 1,000 babies in the UK were damaged by thalidomide. Up to 20,000 may have been harmed by Epilim. Why hasn't this been picked up much sooner by the medicines regulator?
Let's be clear, it's quite inappropriate to compare Epilim sodium valproate with thalidomide.
Why?
I think we should treat with very real caution estimates of the sort that you have quoted, because of the fact that use has declined with the warnings we've given and the fact that people have taken on board the fact that Epilim should not be used unless there is no safe, effective alternative in pregnancy.
When we see new research saying there's a 1 in 3 chance almost of a baby being born with developmental problems, it shouldn't take 40 years for that evidence to emerge, should it?
Evidence emerges over time, and the link between a drug exposure in pregnancy and a developing child takes time to gather.
After the thalidomide tragedy, the government set up an early warning system that's meant to quickly flag up side effects when a medicine is in general use. So if a doctor even suspects that a drug has caused harm, they're meant to fill in a yellow card report like this and send it to the medicines regulator, who then pulls them all together in a central database.
The system is voluntary, and in practice, doctors rarely fill out yellow cards. And when a baby is born with a disability, they don't always make a link to medicine the mum took in early pregnancy.
The yellow card system, which really rely in a rather unsystematic way on individual clinicians reporting problems, that's a really limited way to be able to understand these problems. Some tragic event happens with a baby who's born with a horrible life-ending cardiovascular anomaly, and you just think how awful that is, and you don't think, I wonder if it was due to X 9 months ago.
The physical defects were painfully obvious from birth with thalidomide. But Phoebe and Charlie's problems weren't diagnosed for a full year. Neither case was reported to the regulator.
Did you or any of the doctors involved fill out a yellow card?
No, it's only literally in recent weeks I've even heard of the yellow card.
We found another 14 cases where babies were born with serious health problems after their mums took prescription medicines during pregnancy. The MHRA says its yellow card system is the best in the world at picking up suspected safety problems. But not these cases. All their families say they weren't reported to the regulator.
This isn't just about the safety of epilepsy medication. Most of the drugs used during pregnancy haven't been shown to be safe for the unborn child. And now there's growing concern about one of the most widely prescribed types of drugs, antidepressants.
Who's that? David.
David Wilson has spent the first 8 months of his life in and out of hospital.
Who's that?
When his mum Anna had her 20-week scan, doctors realised he had a serious heart problem. They said he'd need surgery as soon as he was born.
There was just so much uncertainty about when he was born, whether he would even survive a day or survive the first operation, and we just didn't know. He was 11 days old when he had his first surgery, and then he kind of didn't cope very well after that, and he became very swollen, and that was because there was too much blood going into his lungs and his whole body was just swollen up. So he had to have a second operation done at 16 days old.
David was hooked up to machines for 5 weeks. He'll need more open heart surgery before he starts school. Doctors say he may not live beyond 40.
He's got a lot of suffering ahead of him. Yeah. We know that, that's a certainty, and that's pretty awful.
4 years before she got pregnant, Anna went to see her GP because she was suffering from anxiety. He prescribed the antidepressant citalopram, also known as Cipramil.
I had quite a tough time at work, a lot of stress, and my mum had been quite ill as well, and it had just all taken its toll. It worked a treat, it just calmed everything right down and could kind of get back to being myself.
Citalopram is one of a group of commonly used antidepressants called SSRIs, taken by up to 1 in 6 women of childbearing age. When Anna first thought about getting pregnant, she asked her doctor if it was okay to stay on the drug.
So he said it was fine to continue on. In the event, I actually had a miscarriage with that baby. And we went to see the doctor after the miscarriage, and there was no connection made with citalopram.
She went on to have a healthy son, Liam. So she had no worries about getting pregnant again on the drug. After David was born, she did ask what might have caused his heart problem.
We did meet with a cardiologist at one of the scan appointments, and he explained that as far as he knew, there was no kind of environmental factors, or it wasn't because of anything that we as parents had done. It was just one of those things, couldn't be prevented.
What they didn't know was that David's heart problems might have been caused by the antidepressant she was taking. 3 years earlier, on the other side of the Atlantic, a landmark legal battle had highlighted safety problems with another SSRI antidepressant called paroxetine. A mum from Philadelphia took the drug's maker to court because she believed it had caused her son to be born with a serious heart defect. Her son, Liam, is 7 now and small for his age. You wouldn't know that he almost died when he was born.
So this is the first operation? Oh my goodness. And how long was he like that?
For 4 months.
And were you able to pick him up when he was connected to all these?
No, just hold his hand and touch his little face and just, sing to him, read to him when he was awake.
When Michelle David got pregnant, she'd been on paroxetine for a few months. It was prescribed for anxiety.
It just was slight anxiety, that's something I've had my whole life.
Were you told anything about taking the drug during pregnancy?
No.
Michelle took paroxetine for the first 3 months of her pregnancy. just as Liam's vital organs were forming. He was born with a valve missing in his heart and needed life-saving surgery.
They have to stop his heart and then, shock it to get it going again once it's repaired. And then you're just hoping and praying that, he makes it out alive.
Michelle began to wonder if her medication had caused his problems, and eventually found herself suing one of the world's biggest drug companies, the British firm GlaxoSmithKline. Through a court order, her lawyers got access to GSK's confidential archive. What they found there was disturbing evidence about paroxetine's safety during pregnancy from studies done on animals.
It may not be ethical to test drugs on pregnant women, but they are tested on animals before they can be approved for use in humans. And when Michelle David's case came to this court in Philadelphia, shocking evidence was revealed from trials carried out by the manufacturer more than 30 years ago.
Two groups of pregnant rats were compared. Those given paroxetine gave birth to a large number of dead babies. Those not given the drug all gave birth to live babies. In an internal report, a GSK scientist concluded there remains the possibility that this compound could be teratogenic at higher dose levels. In other words, paroxetine might be harmful to babies in the womb.
The problem with that is internally nobody responded to that. Nobody did any studies. Nobody tried to figure out whether or not the drug was inducing birth defects. They just simply took it to market.
So there was evidence as far back as the 80s that paroxetine might cause birth defects in animals at least?
Without question.
I was shocked, but as I sat through those 30 days and heard a lot of the evidence, it was heartbreaking. I kind of felt like, how does no one know that this is going on?
Having heard all of the evidence, the jury decided that paroxetine had caused Liam's heart defect and awarded him compensation of $2.5 million. Since it happened in 2009, GlaxoSmithKline hasn't appealed the verdict, and without admitting liability, the company has gone on to settle out of court more than 1,000 paroxetine heart defect cases in the US, paying more than $1 billion to affected families. Michelle David feels the result was justice, not simply for her own son.
But we were able to help so many other families, hundreds of families, and yeah, that was really important.
GSK told Panorama,
"Patient safety is our #1 priority. We believe we acted responsibly in researching paroxetine, monitoring its safety once it was approved, and updating the pregnancy information in its labelling as new information became available. Animal studies of paroxetine did not show that paroxetine caused birth defects."
In the UK, prescription guidelines warn against taking paroxetine in early pregnancy, but not the other SSRI antidepressants. We've found 8 babies born with heart defects to mums who took a range of SSRIs while pregnant. The evidence about their risks is still not clear-cut. But advice to doctors is about to be updated to take account of research that suggests SSRIs as a group could be linked to birth defects, including heart problems.
The available evidence suggests that there is a risk associated with the SSRIs. And we make quite a lot of effort, really, to discourage women from smoking or drinking even small amounts of alcohol in pregnancy. And yet we're perhaps not saying the same about antidepressant medication, which is going to be carrying similar, if not greater, risks.
There's between a 1 and 2 in 100 chance of babies being born with a birth defect. If the mum took an SSRI, Professor Pilling says that could rise to between 2 and 4 in 100.
You've got double the risk. And for women who are mild to moderately depressed, I don't think that those risks in most cases are really worth taking.
Of course, a lot of pregnancies are unplanned. Do you think that prescribers are giving enough thought to the risks when they prescribe these drugs to women of childbearing age?
I think it's not just when a woman who's pregnant is sitting in front of you. I think it needs to be thought about with a woman who could get pregnant And that's the large majority of women aged between 15 and 45.
Anna Wilson wasn't warned of an increased risk before she became pregnant on the SSRI citalopram 18 months ago. Her son was born with a serious heart condition.
If David's condition was preventable and it wasn't prevented, that's really, really awful. If someone had given me the choice in pregnancy and said there's a risk of this, I would have stopped taking those tablets in a flash.
Even if you were told it was only a very small risk of damage to your baby?
Yeah, I think I still wouldn't have taken that risk. You know, I wasn't given a choice.
Lundbeck, the company that makes citalopram, told us,
in a recent review of the scientific literature, the authors studied potential risks associated with antidepressant use in pregnancy and concluded that citalopram does not appear to be associated with an increased risk of major fetal malformations. The decision not to prescribe antidepressants to a woman who is depressed may generate greater risks to the woman and her fetus than the risks of exposure to the medication.
SSRI antidepressants have been widely prescribed for 2 decades. Like all drugs, they couldn't be tested on pregnant women before they came to the market. But is there a better way to monitor the safety of medicines during pregnancy so that problems can be picked up earlier?
In Belfast, there's a central registry that tracks babies whose mums took epilepsy medication while pregnant. It's voluntary, but the man who runs it says it has quickly identified safety problems and could easily be extended to cover all drugs.
What I think is required would be mandatory registration of drugs taken during pregnancy. When a woman books in an obstetric unit in the early stage of pregnancy, it's routine for the midwife to take a history and to note down what drugs that person's taking. How difficult would it be to have a tear-off sheet to send in to a central registry committee and accumulate data as we have done? It's not rocket science.
Not rocket science, but it's still not happening. Though the MHRA says it is improving the way it monitors the safety of drugs taken in pregnancy.
For every medicine that may be used in a woman of childbearing potential, there will be a plan to gather that data. Increasingly, we use clinical records to link the mother's health record with the baby's health record, and that opens up the opportunity, if we can link to maternity units and hospital records, to have a very complete picture of the drugs that the fetus has been exposed to and its development.
Back in Croydon, all that nursery teacher Jo Burrows can do is wait and hope that her baby has been unaffected by the medicine she's taking.
I've worked with special needs children, and if it happens, it happens. We're still going to love her no matter what.
Protecting a mother's health without damaging her baby can be a difficult balance. But until women know the full risks, how can they make an informed choice about the pills they take during pregnancy? When celebrity tycoon Donald Trump promised to bring 6,000 jobs and £1 billion investment to Scotland, to many it seemed an opportunity too good to miss. 5 years on, there's a golf course, but not much else. So did the Scottish Government know enough about the self-proclaimed billionaire before saying yes?
You'll find details of organisations which offer advice and support about pills and pregnancy on our website, or call the BBC Action Line to hear recorded information on 08000 560 780. Lines are open 24 hours a day and calls are free from a landline. Mobile operators will charge.